Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. I'm Gavin Bolch and my guest is Geraldine Lee from the Friends of Call of Guadalupe Pro-Life Theatre Group. Welcome, Geraldine.
Thank you, Gavin.
You've been travelling a little since we last met.
Yes, I went for 4 weeks to New Zealand, America and Mexico.
All right, well, let's say I have an idea why you might have gone down to New Zealand to catch up with friends.
Yes.
But you did a bit of work in America, didn't you?
Yeah, and wherever I am, I try to promote that pro-life message through our musical Friends of, which is Call of Guadalupe, which is our first sort of key signature musical.
Okay, and you come from a very creative musical family.
Yes, started acting when I was 3 years old. Ribena ad and Elizabeth Taylor passed by when I started crying because I wanted another drink of Ribena, which is sort of like what the advert wanted me to do.
Wow, that's some really good history. So your dad writes some of these musicals?
Yes, he wrote the first musical, Call of Guadalupe, and initially we thought that was the only one, but it did fit in with our philosophy, which is theatre group, which is to promote a culture of life and hope. And so we had that first pro-life musical, and then we had a second musical, which fits in with our vision, which is promoting a culture of life and hope, because St. Augustine is about the life of the saint, St. Augustine, And then we had other musicals before that, which was Saul Paul, and also St. Francis of Assisi. Okay,
well, let's come back to what happened in Mexico. That's quite an interesting place in itself. Great history. Aztecs were pretty crazy people.
Yes, they were crazy on some level. They were also very intelligent. They actually built a lot of Mexico, especially the irrigation water system and a lot of the buildings. They were also good warriors. So during those times, they believed that the gods were, to appease the gods, they needed to sacrifice human beings. And so when I went to Mexico, I saw the altars, and then I also saw the place where Juan Diego, where Mary appeared to Juan Diego. So I suppose I went to Mexico to go to, I suppose, honor Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is the patron of our musical theatre group, where she is the patron of pro-life. And so that was why I went there. And I suppose during my visit there, I really had inspiration, a message that what was very important in theatre is that we're fighting a culture of, I suppose, media and entertainment, which tends to think that you can sell, that sex sells, or, they sell certain values which tend to make money. And our theatre group wants to promote this thing of sacrifice, love, and life.
So it's a different sacrifice to what the Aztecs were making. A sacrifice nonetheless.
Yes, I suppose they were sacrificing human beings so that gods would be appeased, and in a sense it's a kind of idol worship, or thinking that you can buy graces, but ours is one of, where you, I suppose we want to bring the message in our musicals that life is precious, family is precious, commitment is precious, sacrifice is precious, and you can have good entertainment without having sex, drugs, or dark side of violence, and a lot of audience love the music and the songs.
Well, that's why in Hollywood, if you have a kind of a Judeo-Christian worldview in the film, I mean, Spider-Man is such, and you can take your children along to see such films. The family can go, and the redemptive theme is there. And people say, "Oh, that was worth the X dollars I paid to see that movie." feel good, lifts you up.
Yeah, a positive thing.
That's right.
Yes.
So here we are, we're down in Mexico, and if there are discerning viewers, they'll notice that your T-shirt has something on it.
Yes. Yeah, it's got the picture of Juan Diego, and Mary's appearing to Juan Diego, and during that time he felt that he was on the way going up Mount Tepeyac, and he was very worried about his brother, his uncle Bernardino, who was very sick. And Mary appeared to him and asked him to build a church, because to prevent further sacrifice of human beings. And so he actually went to the bishop and asked him to build a church, but the bishop didn't know if this message was really from God, so he asked for a miracle, and he had in his mind what the miracle would be. And so when he obeyed Our Lady and he gave the sign, Mary said to him, "Put some flowers in your tilma, in this cloth, like a tilma, like a poncho, and bring it to the bishop." And so he did, and as he dropped that cloth, the roses, they were the roses that the bishop asked for, but there was a greater miracle, because on his tilma, like on my T-shirt, there was the picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And the picture is almost like a living and miraculous cloth, because they've had miracles from it, and the pigment of the color actually floats on the cloth. And the cloth, even though it's about 600 years old, somewhat, I'm not a very good person at detail about those amount of years, actually the cloth has not deteriorated. And there have been accidents, earthquakes, and acid spilled on the cloth, and there have been like fires or earthquakes, and yet the cloth still is endured after 500 years, and still. And if you study the cloth, there is the picture of Diego in one eye of the picture, and the other eye has the picture or image rather of the bishop. So, and lots of miracles have occurred because of that image.
Well, Geraldine, I trust that your T-shirt may last 600 years. You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Volch, and my guest is Geraldine Lee from the Friends of Call of Guadalupe pro-life theatre group. Now, Geraldine, we were talking about some of this history that was taking place in Mexico and in this particular space, but there was a rather rough, violent Aztec, and something happened to him. What was his name?
Yes, Manuel, and there was the other two. He was part of these Aztec warriors, and they were wanting to eradicate Catholicism or Christianity. So they had planned to a revolution during there was going to be the picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe and the bishop and all this, and they were actually going to attack them. But in the process, somehow he got hurt accidentally by an arrow, and it went into his eye, and he died. And so Diego and the crowd prayed for a miracle, and they brought in the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe and asked her to pray for and to work a miracle through the Lord. And in actual fact, he came back to life, and that same cloth, that same image exists today. Yeah, and there have been many other miracles. Yeah. So
the killing stopped. This uprising didn't take place.
Yes. So after that miracle occurred, they got the Aztecs converted to Christianity, and the sacrifice of human beings stopped. Yeah. And
okay, now that's interesting. The sacrifice of human beings stopped because someone came back to life.
Yes.
And today we live in this culture of death.
Yes, and I, and that was the message also that when I went to Mexico was that we live in a culture of death where the self that wants something straight away, when they want it, how they want it, is put above. You know, there's so much about pro-choice. I want it when I want it, how I want it, and without sometimes seeing the consequences. So, you know, it's almost we have the philosophy of one of the philosophies of that the means justifies the ends. That if it has a happy end, then it doesn't matter how you do it, what you do to do it, which is I suppose where abortion comes in, or euthanasia, or families, you know, parents neglecting, especially fathers and mothers, for neglecting their children because of their ambition, you know. So, and it's justified and it's accepted that people, you know, go to work or put themselves, their education above their children, above their family. So our theatre group is about that life is important and everyone's valuable. So we, in our theatre group as such, we don't, we accept all people to join our theatre group. And we are inclusive, and because we think that everyone's inherently valuable. And I suppose that's the message we give, and you know, in our shows. So, you know, even though we had our first pro-life musical, now we do other musicals that are life-affirming. And we're going to have a musical Saint Augustine, Amazing Augustine, very soon. Yeah, and I suppose in Amazing Augustine, where he brings that life is that he had a very promiscuous, turbulent life, Augustine, where he put himself above, you know, people. So he had a mistress, he had her only for sex, you know, and he had children, you know, and he didn't think about the commitment to his family and to his lover. He saw her initially as someone more to be used, and in a sense she took that philosophy on, because when he became a Christian, she said, and he said to her, you know, I haven't really loved you. And then she said, you know, ain't I good enough in bed? You know, haven't I served you enough? So he was meaning that he hadn't loved her fully, like, you know, commitment, sacrifice, and looking after his child, children. And so I'm not very good on details. So it might be one child or maybe two children. I'm not actually sure. So pardon me if I haven't got my details, but the main crux of it was that he chose to, he saw the value of life and fulfillment in life, because one thing that comes across in that musical is that he says that too late has he believed in God, because in that musical he says that you can have fulfillment in God, that you don't have to use people or use drugs, and you know, be materialistic, and still you are you can be fulfilled and happy.
Well, his mum for many years was, you could say, on his case.
Yes.
And what was she trying to encourage him to do?
To love God, and she, I think apparently she prayed for more than 20 years, and she became a saint. She was Saint Monica, yeah, and she was praying for the day that he would let go of his ways and come to God.
So when he eventually finds that Christ has died for him, he then begins to die to himself, right? And so he says that life now is better than... Yes. He said in one of his sayings, he said, "Too late have I loved you," and there is actually in the musical David Lamouveau, who has composed the music, and John Lee, who wrote the musical, and the lyrics. There's a song saying, "Too late have I loved you," because he said that there was so much beauty, there's so much happiness, and he thought that whenever his mother wanted to convert him, he said later on when he's old, and then when he did finally come to God, he said, "Oh, too late have I loved you," because he had so much joy from believing in God, so much fulfillment. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, what's really good about that statement is that the abundant life found in faith in God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit is far greater than the satisfaction from sex.
Yes, which is what he held on to a lot, the woman he had. Yes. And he has been known as a great sinner, but also a great saint.
Well, Geraldine, on that point, all of us being great sinners, you're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Bolch and my guest is Geraldine Lee from the Friends of Call of Guadalupe, the pro-life theatre group. Now, for those budding actors out there and directors, and how about going to www.callofguadalupe, that's Guadalupe. Now, how's that, Geraldine? Is that a good
Excellent.
Good.
Yes, for them to answer the call. That's why it's called Call of Guadalupe.
Okay, so if there's this creativity neuron that's just woken up in someone in our audience, do contact Geraldine.
Yes.
And join the group. Because things happen, don't they?
Yes, like we're only going to have the show in two weeks and a bit. Mm-hmm. On the 23rd to the 26th.
Okay.
And I'm acting in it.
Oh, very good. Well, there's a reason to come along.
Yes.
Who's going to give you the Oscar?
No, I leave it for the young these days. I had my chance.
All right. Now, things actually happen in this community, this theatre community. Good things. What are some of the stories?
Yeah, I suppose while we're being life-affirming, we also inclusive, meaning we open it to all, and we give opportunities to people to actually star and train people up freely. So I help out with the singing, and we have another guy, Antonio, who also gives some free singing to the group. Yeah, and so we encourage people's gifts and we let them get up there, and we've had people in our theatre group who were despairing and quite lost. Like one guy was at the stage of begging and a bit homeless, and he actually has grown and now is getting a main role in our show, and also he's doing a community welfare course. So not only do we act and perform hopeful shows that give life, we also support our cast and encourage people to join of all walks of life. And we also make it very entertaining because we have very good actors who are close to professional or some professional who give their time because they believe in this life-affirming or pro-life kind of theatre group.
So you walk the talk.
We endeavour to, being great sinners too, like Augustine. Yes. We rely on God's grace, because I think as Christians we're not saying we're perfect, but we're saying we're sinners in need of God's grace and forgiveness. And I think because we've experienced, and I've experienced God's forgiveness, it gives me the strength to also forgive others. Because when you work in theatre, it's a bit like sandpaper ministry. You rub each other, because you're working in closed rooms. We once had, when we were rehearsing, and in our dressing room, we had nearly 50 people packed into a small room, nearly like a bedroom size, trying to get changed and trying to sometimes practice our lines. And sometimes in theatre we have people who've had challenges or problems in the past, and they get triggered with trauma, but people experience a lot of sense of community, and we all support each other, pray for each other, and we, as much as possible, keep people in our group and support them. I remember one of our musicals, when we did Call of Guadalupe, this lady was on chemotherapy, and she said, I want to do this for God, and so one minute I was praying with her and she was vomiting from the chemo, and next minute she was on the stage, and with another person who had been raped many years ago, and she also sometimes with theatre comes triggers, and she felt that trauma came up, but then we prayed for her, and she was able to forgive the person who raped her, and she was able to carry on her role, you know, in acting. And so things happen on and off the stage. Yeah, and we also had a family where their marriage was breaking down, and the cast was praying for that marriage, and it was renewed, you know. So we have a lot of things that happen on stage and off stage. And we had even a child who had great faith. She sprained her ankle, and we said, sorry, you'll have to, you know, not be on stage. And she was so upset, and she said, why don't you pray that God will heal me? And so I thought, well, she's asked for prayer, so I prayed, held her hand and prayed. And then I went on stage, you know, and then when we came off stage, she was jumping for joy, and she said, I'm healed. And she said, I can go back on stage now. And she, you know, she was actually, you know, she fell because she was trying to reach, you know, a cupboard up there, and then she sprained her ankle, but then was healed. So she was back on stage. So we have, you know, miracles that happen backstage and on stage.
And I think this is the wonder that occurs when you're being interdependent, neither codependent or independent. It's that family working together. Now, when you were overseas on this trip, you took your sister with you. Tell me a little bit about your sister.
Yeah, my sister, I have a brother and two sisters who have a disability. But this one, the one that we went together was, we traveled around America and Mexico, and she's a person that believes in getting involved in life, you know, and even when it's hard, you know. And so we had to manage situations of wheelchair accessibility on planes, on trains, in toilets where there were small cars. And I suppose our buildings and transports built for the majority. And that's this area of the value of everyone, whether disabled. So at times I got very frustrated because I felt that, hey, you know, the plane should make the seats so that she can get in easily. Instead of thinking about the money of making the plane bigger, they're saying, oh, we have to make it narrow because it costs more. So we couldn't bring the wheelchair down the middle, you know, to get her on. And so we had to do all different things, like get her onto special harnesses, and so I lifted her with my friend and with lots of people. But what I thought was positive was people's willingness to help out. So there was a positive side, but there was a sad side where some of the staff at different, different buildings and, bus drivers were very grumpy. Like, you're taking my time having to, get the wheelchair in and stopping the traffic and all this sort of thing. And yet some buses have said, yes, she's got a right too. Even though she's disabled, she has got a right for us to be polite to help her get on the bus. So I thought she's courageous, because some people with disabilities can just stay home because it's too hard. Yes. But she said, no, let's go to Mexico, let's go to America.
Geraldine, with all that enthusiasm and effort, I'm trusting that our audience tonight will want to be as enthusiastic about coming to see the play, The Amazing Augustine.
Yes, I hope they will, because it's only 2 weeks' time, and I think they'll have a great fun.
Yes. Thank you. You've been watching Support Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye.